Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining and for your patience. We're excited to have all of you here for our virtual event and to meet with Asian Development Bank, who will share knowledge around their monitoring experience. Please remember there is a chat section if you have any questions. We highly encourage you to ask your questions. We wish this to be helpful for the whole community. We will address all these questions after Asian Development Bank's intervention. Please note also this session will be recorded. And with that being said, we can get started and I'll pass it on to Jamie. Thank you.
Thanks everyone, welcome. So we'll start by doing a quick overview of Datadog if you're not familiar, and then we'll start diving into the contents of the webinar. So to give you some background on Datadog, we've become the unified SaaS monitoring platform for dev, ops, and business teams in the cloud age. We do that by monitoring all of your infrastructure and applications, regardless of where it lives, on-prem, your cloud environments, and allowing our users to really make informed business decisions and make sure that they're data-driven decisions as well. So as you can see here, we were founded in 2010. We really started by becoming the platform for infrastructure monitoring and have understood the market and strategically expanded to become a unified platform for all of your monitoring, whether it be front end, back end, and everything in between. So you see, not only have we grown rapidly in the past few years, but by adding exciting new product lines, we really have become that single place for your team to all find value, whether it be your business teams, your network teams, and security teams, and allowing you to have that simple self-service model where anyone in your team can use the product. We hear about that a little today, about how Matt has encouraged adoption by ensuring that the platform is really easy to use. Now, to talk about how we do what we do, to show you kind of a high level is that we're bringing in data from all of our integrations. We're collecting it from your servers, containers, applications, and all of these applications by pulling in the data on one single agent. Now that same agent actually collects your metrics, traces, and logs, allowing for seamless correlation once the data hits the platform. With all of our deep capabilities, once the data does hit, we can graph them with machine learning insights, with dashboarding, and of course, collaborate with your teams in order to truly break down silos in this DevOps world. Now, we talked a little bit about all of our products, but what that brings to a team is allowing a single place again. It allows for collaboration. It allows for a proactive monitoring strategy by adopting synthetics, by looking at long-term trends with real user monitoring. And at the end of the day, it's to ensure that all teams can find value out of the platform. So with that being said, I'd like to hand it over to Matt to tell us a little bit about Asian Development Bank.
And hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Farley, and I work for the Asian Development Bank as an IT production support specialist. I've been here for about 2 years, and Datadog is one of the main things I've been focusing on. So a little bit about Asian Development Bank. So we are a multilateral development bank. That means that we are here not to make money, but we're here actually to help develop countries in our region. So in the Asia Pacific region, we have 68 member countries, and the mission overall is to eradicate poverty. So to do that, we provide loans, grants, knowledge, and consulting expertise. So the types of projects that we get involved with, if a country comes to us and says we would like a loan or we would like a grant for this, we kind of evaluate it under the lens of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were put forth by the United Nations. And the UN says these are meant to transform the world, to get rid of poverty, hunger, increase education, gender equality, those kinds of things. So if we are going to engage in a project and fund a project, it generally would fall in one of these categories. And again, we're not for profit in the sense that we aren't trying to make money. Our number one priority is actually achieving these goals.
Awesome, thanks. So I'd love to then kind of shift gears and talk about how Datadog and Asian Development Bank have really been able to work together. So with that being said, before we dive in too deep into all the strategies that Matt has implemented, I'd like to take a step back. And Matt, if you want to share with everyone a little bit about ADB's tech stack today and kind of where you see yourself going in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So right now, we have most of our infrastructure is on-premise, and it's what you might think of as traditional IT infrastructure. So your Windows servers, your Linux servers, your database servers, And yes, I'm very proud to say we still have a mainframe. We're holding out. We love the mainframe, but it's on its way out the door. But then we have a strategic direction, and that is that we want to adopt kind of a cloud-first approach. So for any new projects, new solutions coming into ADB, we look at software as a service. We look at hosting in the cloud, things like Microsoft Azure, Office 365. And so Datadog is a pretty good fit for us because it can support these very old legacy systems. You know, the other day we hooked up an old email appliance to Datadog for some monitoring, all the way through to the modern cloud native types of functions. So that was a very attractive part of Datadog, is we can get end-to-end, you know, 360-degree full monitoring from one solution, you know, regardless of the maturity or state of our infrastructure.
Definitely. And I kind of want to take a step back and even think about like kind of monitoring as a whole, because it can be pretty challenging at this level to kind of encourage all of your teams to really want to monitor, because a lot of them aren't really seeing it as their core job. So can you touch a little bit about kind of some of the beliefs that your team had about monitoring prior to Datadog?
Yeah, so unfortunately, going back to the traditional mindset or the traditional way of doing things with kind of older tools, you have a situation where every team was kind of on their own island with their own tool. So the database team had their tool, the network team had their tool, the Windows team had their tool, and each team only had access to their monitoring tool. And so if something went wrong, a mass email would go out to all of these teams, and it would kind of be a blast saying, hey, my application is not functioning properly, somebody help me. And you know, the Windows team would look at their tool, but they didn't have access to look at the database team. If the database team suspected it was the network, they don't have access to look at the network's team's tool. And so a lot of these tools, not only are they siloed without access, but they're also you know, aging. You know, some of them were invented 20 years ago. So we spend a lot of time kind of chasing people, chasing emails, and asking people to look in their tools. And then it kind of felt like it was a bunch of people with blindfolds running around, you know, trying to make sense of why is this application not working. And it was a lot of time and a lot of effort, but not very much benefit.
Definitely. And I think all those problems are things that a lot of organizations are probably facing today. So as you kind of thought about those problems and shifted to Datadog, if you could kind of touch a little bit upon where you started to see Datadog provide value immediately to your team.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, one great thing about Datadog that we've used here is that it can do the A to Z, you know, regardless of old versus new, cloud, on-premise, but it also does an excellent job of unifying the silos. You know, I think this might be the first type of solution, type of monitoring solution we've had where the kind of out-of-the-box approach is that everybody has access to it. So Datadog is not only monitoring the database and the server, but also, you know, network and end users and IoT and that kind of thing. So in one system, in one website, one pane of glass, regardless of which which team you're on, everybody's looking at the same thing and everybody has access. So if the network team suspects that maybe the server is running out of space, if they say, hey, it's not the network, I think the disk ran out of space, the network team can open up Datadog and look at the disk. We've also been able to kind of add random devices that we never really thought of monitoring before. For example, we had an issue with a VIP, one of our VIP's printers ran out of paper, and we thought, you know what, using SNMP, we can probably monitor the paper level with Datadog. So it's a very kind of older use case, but it fits right into our solution of getting us a single pane of glass. Again, everybody has access. Another thing we've done is we've kind of gotten away from the emails. We've adopted Microsoft Teams for chat collaboration. So it's kind of like Slack, whereas instead of blasting out emails to everybody, we get in a chat group and we all look at Datadog and kind of talk about what we're seeing. So from an efficiency perspective, where people are spending their time and how quickly we can pinpoint issues, it's been a complete change.
Awesome, definitely. And I think that all sounds good and great, right? I'm sure some people here are thinking, okay, well, how do I convince my teams to really adopt this and want to use this tool? So getting people on board is kind of the challenge that all these enterprises are facing on a day-to-day. Sounds good and great, they want to adopt it. But I know you've taken a lot of really unique and creative approaches to ensure that multiple business teams and units within ADB can find value in the platform. So can you touch a little bit about some of the unique approaches that you've taken in your role at ADB?
Yeah, so this kind of gets into the theme of the webinar today, and how do we get people to adopt and actually learn something new and use this. So I spent many, I don't want to say sleepless nights, but many nights laying in bed, driving to work, just thinking about in my head, okay, we're in a situation where I'm going to be that guy showing up on somebody's door saying, hey, I know you're busy. I know you have a full-time job and you're probably tired and you don't want anything else on your plate. And I'm going to be asking you to learn a new tool and start using a new tool. But unfortunately, I'm not able to come to you and say, hey, you can stop doing this and start doing that. So I didn't want to be that guy just kind of throwing things on people's plates and asking them to do new things. And also I didn't have the authority really to control somebody's workload. And I knew, and that's mainly because I knew that my team could not do this for the whole bank. So my team specifically is about 6 or 7 people. And so we would not be able to do all of the monitoring for the entire bank. So I had to get really creative. How can I get people motivated and get them involved and get them to take time out of their workday to actually learn this new tool, and at the same time kind of preach to them and convince them that, hey, this will make your life better. You're quite busy now, but if you take the time to get over the learning curve and learn this tool, your life's going to get a lot better. And so I'm thinking, okay, we have about 16 teams. How can I get all of these people on board? And that was the challenge.
Awesome. So I think that kind of transitions into starting to talk about what you did. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this, I've never done anything like this before. I can't say it came to me in a vision, but it was probably in the shower. And I thought, okay, why don't we do some type of crowdsourcing where we have a champions model? And by champion, I mean, we ask every team to nominate somebody to kind of raise their hand and say, okay, I'm willing to play this game. I'm willing to get involved. I'm willing to learn this tool. I'm going to go on faith that this tool is going to make my life better. And my team will be the facilitators of this process. So we would actually have, we set up a 2-day training class. So we did an ADB two-day Datadog crash course. And we got these 50 people who were nominated to become our ADB Datadog champions. And we trained them in Datadog. And we kind of told them that, hey, this is going to be a net positive for your team, for your organization. It's going to be something good for you. And we built this out into a community of practice, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But what you're seeing in the slide here is essentially, if anyone on their team or in the business has a need related to monitoring or a question, they would go to their internal team Datadog champion. They wouldn't go, directly to Datadog, or they wouldn't come directly to my team. They would go to the champion first as kind of the first point of contact, if that makes sense. So the rest of the seminar or webinar, we're really going to dive into how this works.
Awesome. And I love to talk about the training. So as simple as it is, you want to make sure that everyone is equipped to kind of go out and find all the value out of the platform and all of its many capabilities. So let's kind of start transitioning to how you began to kind of identify these leaders and champions across each unit.
Great. Yeah. So earlier I said, had to kind of convince them to raise their hand and get involved. And so one way we did that is through the age-old form of bribery. And the better term, the term I'd like to use instead of bribery is gamification. So we made this into a game. And for those who haven't heard of the process of gamification, it's essentially applying video game type of principles to the business world. A good example of gamification was at the last place I worked, the agency that provided life insurance for us gamified our life insurance. And so what they did is they took our health statistics, like our blood pressure, our weight, how often we exercise, and then we said, okay, over the next 6 months, we will all improve those metrics by being more healthy, and then we would get a monetary discount on our life insurance. So they gamified life insurance. So we applied this gamification concept to the Datadog Champions program. So what you're looking at now on the slide is a certification process whereby each of those champions in a vertical silo, as they complete Datadog deployment, whether it's tagging their systems, installing the agents, setting up the monitoring, each one of those is kind of a step towards their certification. And so going chronologically from top to bottom, those are all the steps they have to do. And then that blue step there with the yellow badge, that is your ADB certification. So if you get there, then we're talking about the right side of the slide. So the right side of the slide is the bribery, it's the rewards. And so in green letters, those are Philippine peso gift cards. And so you can see we have rewards. So if the first 10 practitioners get gift cards, and they get Datadog socks and a Datadog t-shirt, and then the next 10 practitioners get the gift card and the t-shirt. And then even beyond that, we have special achievements they can unlock. So let's say you become an ADB certified practitioner, you get the gift cards, you get the t-shirt, but then there's even more you can do to unlock special achievements to win more gift cards. And so all of these milestones and achievements, they are all actually deploying and using Datadog functionality in the A2B environment. And we have this public dashboard. In the slide, you can only see about 10 to 15 people, but actually, like I said earlier, we actually have 50 different champions in the program, and they're all working through their certification. Okay, so here's an example of somebody who achieved certification. So to actually get certification, it's not kind of just a pat on the back and, you know, good job and a participation award. It's actually, we do a 25 multiple choice proctored examination. So they come to my team, closed book, they can't Google the answers, and we have 25 multiple choice questions that we ask them about the Datadog platform, administering it, using it, the functionality, and they have to get 20 out of 25 correct. And then they are awarded the official ADB certificate of completion. You are now an ADB Datadog certified practitioner. And so far, people love the process. They love the test. And one person actually, after they passed the test, they posted publicly on Facebook, kind of, you know, hey, I'm so relieved. I passed the test. I'm so excited. You know, congratulations to myself, kind of thing. But it was fun to see how excited they were about becoming an ADB certified practitioner.
Awesome. And I think naturally you kind of have to create a little bit of internal competition now after people get certified, kind of show the ranks. So I know that that's something you've done. So I'd love to kind of hear you talk a little bit about that scoreboard and kind of how you see that moving forward.
Yeah, part of this whole gamification program, the champions, the dashboard, it's all open and public. And as a community, we all reference it and look at it. So we have a scoreboard. Like any good game, you want a scoreboard to see who scored the most points. So on the left-hand side, that blue meter is how far they are towards certification. So are they halfway to certification, 50%, 60% certification? And then in the middle, you kind of see who were the top 10 people who got certified, those who've unlocked achievements. And then on the right side is like their scoreboard, their score count in terms of gift cards. So the more achievements they unlock, if they get certified not only as a regular practitioner, but we also have something called an advanced practitioner. And that's if they unlock 4 achievements, they graduate to advanced practitioner and they get more points or more gift cards. So this is a pretty cool way to keep the game going and keep it fun.
Definitely. And with all these people now starting to kind of use the platform more and more, if I had to guess, many questions are now kind of coming up across your organization about Datadog. So can you talk a little bit about the community of practice and how you kind of implement this Ask Anything model?
Yeah, definitely. So earlier I did mention the community of practice. And so to facilitate that, we have monthly live meetings, and we also have this online, this is a Microsoft Teams group. It could be Slack if you're a Slack user. And so we've set this up to facilitate our interactions as a community of practice. So if you can kind of squint your eyes and see on the slide there, we have one chat channel per Datadog feature. So it could be dashboards, real user monitoring, logging. And everyone in the community, we say, hey, if we have discussions, questions, whatnot, let's post it within this specific channel. So if you have a question, if you're struggling to get logging working for your application, don't go directly to Datadog and ask your question. Don't come directly to my team and ask the question. Post your question in the community of practice and let the community, let your peers, the other champions, not only participate in the dialogue, but benefit from it. So if you post the question there and then my team jumps in and answers it, it's documented for everybody to see and everybody to learn from. We even have one of the questions in the Datadog certification tests that they take is, if you have a question, who do you ask? You know, A, the vendor, B, your teammate, C, and so and so. And it's actually kind of a trick question. It's, you're not supposed to ask my team, you're supposed to post it in the community of practice. And then of course, my team, as the Datadog administrators, you know, we're watching the COP and making sure everybody gets their questions answered. So in addition to the kind of the online chat COP, we have a monthly meeting. In these monthly COP meetings, all 50 champions get together. We get on a Zoom call just like this, and our agenda items vary month to month, but in general, they consist of Datadog champions presenting to the community what they have done internally for their team, for other people to see. And so that can be really powerful in inspiring the other teams and showing them kind of the art of the possible. And we've had many instances where another team sees widgets or innovative solutions in a dashboard that another team was demonstrating at the COP, and they say, oh, I'm going to copy that. You know, let's talk offline. Can you help me? At the COP, we also talk about what is new in Datadog. And that's one thing we love about Datadog is every couple of weeks, they're deploying new features. And often these are features we didn't know we needed or we wanted them and we were waiting for them. So we review what's new every month. Another topic might be a deep dive on a specific feature or a knowledge sharing, but the important part is that we're keeping the momentum going by meeting together every month, and then my team is making sure that we have a real healthy and meaty agenda prepared and ready to go. And as part of becoming an ADB certified practitioner, you actually have to come to this COP and present what you've done for your team before you can move on to the next step, which is actually taking the examination. So through this, we really hope to spread and lift the expertise and the knowledge and the competency of our Datadog practitioners throughout the bank. Another piece of this, which isn't in the slide, is we have something called Datadog TV. And so we have it's like a YouTube internal to the bank. It's hosted by Microsoft Stream, but you can think of it as like an internal YouTube. So all of these community of practice sessions are recorded, and we put them on Datadog TV. And then as people think of tutorials and examples and things they want to share with the other champions, they do a screencast and they record it, and then they put it on Datadog TV. And so a lot of times when questions are asked or when new champions join the program, we are referring them to Datadog TV episodes to help them get caught up or learn more. And it's been a very fruitful experience.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you sent me a few of those videos, and they were definitely interesting to hear a little bit about your community of practice more. I see that you have a Microsoft Teams channel in this dedicated specifically to governance. So before we kind of move on from gamification, I'd love if you could touch a little bit about governance and how you kind of do that within Datadog.
So governance is one of the most important parts. If you can imagine, you have 50 different people in the same system going around creating things, naming things. And when we adopted Datadog, we got onboarding from the Datadog engineers. So they spent a couple weeks with us in these Zooms calls, helping us to kind of get onboarded to the system. One thing that really hit home with us was the importance of governance, especially around things like your tagging conventions. How you are tagging different systems in Datadog can either make or break its ability to do its job and help you out. So we wanted to be very explicit in governance. Like you said, we have a governance channel in the Microsoft Teams, and we have a governance wiki that documents our naming conventions, our tagging conventions, the do's and don'ts. And so we wanted to put something in place so that when, say, a third party who's maybe not part of ADB, when they build something for us before it goes into production, or even within ADB before anything goes into production, we wanted to ensure that it's being monitored properly like Datadog. And so for this, we kind of use the metaphor of vaccinations. So if you look at the cute pictures of the dog on the slide there, you think of your dog, it's your pet and you love it. You don't want to let it go out into the wild unless it's been properly vaccinated, or else it gets sick. So we have these solutions. We don't want to put them into the wild or put them into production unless they've been vaccinated with the protection that Datadog provides. Things like real user monitoring, synthetic monitoring, logging, APM, et cetera. And so we have a very strong PMO at ADB, a project management office, and we have a very strong CAB, a change approval board. And so putting these processes together, we said, okay, let's come up, just like you would have with your animal, the vaccination chart of what vaccines they need. We came up with a vaccination chart for Datadog. So nothing goes into production now unless it's had its Datadog vaccines. And that's an example on the left-hand side of the slide. And has the application had the RUM agent installed? Has it had the APM agent installed? Are the servers that it's on had the server agent installed? Is logging set up? Are all of these things set up? And we don't let things go into production now unless they've had all of these vaccinations. And that's a joint effort between the project team, my team coaching, and then whoever the champion is that will kind of be inheriting that system when it goes into operations. So it is a group effort.
Definitely. And to kind of wrap up gamification, can you talk a little bit about how these results have really been implemented across your organization from each team, and kind of where you've seen some successful outcomes?
So we're only, I would say, maybe 6 months truly into our deployment of Datadog. And so far it's been a smashing success in terms of the adoption of the champions. There's nothing that makes me more happy and more proud when I'm sitting back in a COP and I'm watching one of our champions present what they've done, and to hear them tell a story about how their life got better because of what Datadog has done for them. And I'm truly thinking of their lives, because these people are working hard, they have long commutes, and when their life is made better because of a tool that we've done through this program, it really feels good. We had a success story hit my desk this morning. We'll talk about how we capture success stories later, but one of the success stories this morning was what I'm describing, where their life got a lot better for the users, for the people, and that's very rewarding. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see these are the gamification rewards that people get. You have the t-shirts, the gift cards, Datadog coffee mugs. And then we also are making these trophies. We're in the Philippines here in Manila, our headquarters, and it's pretty cheap to have trophies made. And so we are having Datadog champion or A to B certified practitioner trophies made. So when somebody becomes a certified practitioner, that's something they can put on their desk and kind of show off to the world like, hey, I made it, I'm a champion. But if you try to quantify some of the results that we've had in, again, just 6 months, and we're only barely, I'd say we're still new on our journey. We have 50 champions in the program, 9 have been certified. We've awarded 10,000 Philippine pesos of gift cards. We have 9,000 servers/hosts in Datadog, about 100 containers, 163 dashboards have been created, and over 1 million synthetic browser tests per month. And these numbers are just going up consistently every single month as more and more people get involved and as the champions work through the program.
And if you don't know what synthetic browser tests are, we're definitely going to get to that in a little bit. We'll elaborate more on browser tests and kind of where we have seen that take over at ADB especially. Awesome. And I know obviously thinking about success in terms of quantitative data is especially important for your organization. So I'd like to kind of shift gears now to kind of thinking about how we can actually define success at the enterprise level. I know when many enterprises start to think about, okay, it's time for me to buy a monitoring tool, it can be a little difficult to kind of justify the cost and provide a return on investment. And obviously, since ADB is a publicly funded organization, there's even more of a need to highlight the value in this tool and kind of show all of your stakeholders what you're truly getting from it. So you've kind of taken another unique approach to quantifying how you think about Datadog and how you can quantify the results. So can you talk a little bit about your approach to defining success and turning it into a tangible measurement?
Yeah, so, surprise for everyone on the webinar, Datadog's not free. So we did have to spend money to get Datadog. And so I felt that on my shoulders, again, as Jamie said, ADB, our company, is funded by taxpayer dollars of 68 member countries. So as an American, my tax money has gone into ADB and it's being spent on something like Datadog. So I wanted to quantify and capture what is the value we're actually getting out of this. And so it's actually, it can be quite difficult. A lot of people are grown up, kind of trained, we've been brainwashed. When you take a test in school, the teacher wants the exact absolute value on your math test, for example. And people are saying, hey, estimate the value of what you've done here. And so it's really hard to get your mind away from this absolute answer. There's a good book on the left there that talks about the art of ranged estimation. And it kind of says you can measure anything. You could measure how many people are in a football stadium if you get away from this thinking of absolute estimation and start thinking about ranged estimation. So you could measure anything. So if we apply this to the Datadog success stories, we're kind of thinking about, okay, what is the range of the value we have here? And maybe a kind of a thought experiment to help you understand the value of range versus absolute. If you were to look out the window and look at a building, look at a skyscraper, and I said, how many feet or how many meters tall is that building? You're not going to be very accurate. You're probably going to be wrong. Chances are you won't get that. But if I say, hey, look at those buildings, can you give me the range? Is that building between 0 and 10 floors? 10 and 50 floors, 50 and 100 floors? You're far, far, far more likely to get the correct range. And when it comes to estimating the value and the impact of something like this with Datadog in our use case, we don't need to know the exact dollar. We just want to quantify a range. And so on the next slide, we're going to talk about what exactly ranges that we've used. So we're using the metaphor of t-shirts. I think everybody can relate to small, medium, large, extra large, and XXL. And we've applied some dollar ranges to that. So again, if you think about the example, your boss says, hey, you got value out of this use case, tell me how much value you got. Your mind has been brainwashed to think, okay, I need to get the exact number and I'm stressed out. We actually kind of do what you would call a napkin, back of the napkin estimate in a range. So we say, okay, we had a success story, let's document it. We have a slide template where we document it. And we say, okay, about how much time? Did this save you an hour a day, an hour a week, an hour a month? Let's talk about that for a minute, literally a minute. And then did we save any licenses? Were we able to get rid of any tools? Did we avoid any costs that are now we don't need? And then what is the impact to the business? How are we helping them? Are we saving them time? And literally in the few minutes in the back of a napkin, you can get really accurate. Is this a small, medium, large, extra large, or XXL? And so then we capture these, one slide per success story. And we now have a library of success stories that's just growing every day. And as we get to the end of the year, we report back to management and say, okay, the success or the value of this project of bringing Datadog into ADB, let's let these stories speak for themselves. We have X number of stories. And the one that hit my inbox this morning was a really good example. It was somebody wrote up a success story because they deploy a web application. And quite often as this application goes out to hundreds of users in production, these users are in many, many different countries, many different devices, tablets, phones, desktops, using different browsers, Chrome, Edge, Safari, Firefox. And so the users are getting errors. And maybe it's a browser-specific error or a geography-specific error. And when they call the help desk and they call for support, it's very, very difficult for them to kind of narrow down and replicate the error. Well, they implemented the Datadog Real User Monitoring. And Real User Monitoring is a little JavaScript agent that runs in the web page that captures all of the errors and then feeds them back to Datadog. So now when a user calls and says, hey, I was in Sri Lanka on an iPad and I got this error, the help desk or the people supporting the application, they can go into Datadog and using the Real User Monitoring, they can find that person's session and then they can see all of the JavaScript errors that had been captured by Datadog. And so the success of their story was just how much time has been saved troubleshooting and narrowing down issues in kind of a before versus after. And again, it was one of those stories that made their life so much better and it made me proud to have brought them such a solution.
Definitely. And I know you have thousands of stories just like that where people have kind of told you like, hey, this is what I was able to save. So thinking about another one, as ADB and probably many of the other companies on the line today are as they've already kind of shifted to this work from home model, you've kind of taken a creative approach to justifying how you can kind of quantify working from home and really monitor those end user devices. So let's shift gears and think about one example where you've had to put a value on a project you've done with your end user bandwidth monitoring.
Yeah, so when COVID-19 hit the world and hit the Philippines, we had a very interesting situation where Asian Development Bank is an international organization. We have staff who hail from nearly 70 countries around the world. And Philippines isn't necessarily their home, quote unquote. And so when COVID-19 hit and the whole city and the country was going into quarantine, a lot of people made the call that, hey, I prefer to go to my home country to ride this out. So at that point, we went from a situation where most of our staff were working inside of ADB offices, either in the headquarters here or our field offices in Asia Pacific, to any country around the world on hundreds of different ISPs, different devices, different bandwidth. And we needed them to be able to continue to do their job because their job is actually bringing relief to these developing member countries that desperately need, like emergency COVID funding at this time that they're getting from Asian Development Bank. So to make sure that money continues to flow, that business continues to happen, we need to make sure that these users are still able to, log in and use our applications successfully.
Definitely. So can you kind of talk about what you've done with Datadog to really monitor these end user devices, kind of focusing on this dashboard that we're looking at in front of us?
Yeah, so we wanted to come up with a way to monitor the quality and the health of our staff's internet connections, because again, that was going to be key to the bank continuing its business. And so what we did is we deployed a custom homegrown agent on everybody's end user device. So they're ADB laptops mostly. So imagine I have an ADB laptop. I went home to Germany. I'm in my house working in Germany. And that custom agent on my laptop is sending telemetry to Datadog. So we're using the Datadog functionality referred to as custom metrics. And so that agent is doing a performance test between that person's laptop and our data center in Manila, and also Office 365 and a Microsoft Azure data center. And so the three basic bandwidth tests. And so then the results of those tests are sent back to Datadog as a custom metric. And then what we can do in the Datadog dashboard is, as you see in the screenshot, we can do lots of different filtering, analysis, and over time, how has the bandwidth been, how has the latency been? And one of the really cool examples of how we got a lot of value out of this is that we also get insight as to how these internet service providers are performing in many different countries. And we had an instance where one of the top ISPs in one of the largest countries where we operate was experiencing a very, very, very significant performance degradation that was not only affecting ADB staff, but it was also affecting the constituents of their country. So their local population was suffering from this. We actually saw this on our dashboard and got alerted to it before the ISP even knew about it. And we called them up, notified them, let them know, and then they fixed it, and then performance went back to normal for ADB staff and again the people in the country. So it was a big win, you know, for everybody, that ADB's, you know, mission in helping developing member countries, you know, we were able to play a role in that through IT. There's also, we can actually point at some hard dollars that were saved, in that originally we were putting the data in Azure, and that comes with a cost. So we were spending about $2,000 a year to host that data in Azure. And we very quickly, I mean, it had only been there a few weeks, where we thought, hey, let's move it into Datadog and we can do this dashboard thing. And for Datadog, it was essentially free, because you get a quota of free custom metrics. You only get charged for custom metrics after you've exceeded the quota. Us being new to Datadog, we weren't anywhere near the quota, so we essentially got a solution for free.
Yeah, definitely. And I know obviously staying kind of proactive in all of this COVID age when everyone's working from home is top of mind. And something we've kind of alluded to throughout this webinar a little bit is talking about browser tests and talking about synthetic monitoring. So I want to shift gears and kind of hone in on the example of bandwidth monitoring. So obviously that's crucial for your proactive strategy, but we can start thinking about how synthetic monitoring has allowed your organization and many others to create a safety net of your applications. So to start off, I'll kind of walk us through Datadog's approach to synthetic monitoring, and then Matt will kind of go into talking about how ADB uses it today. So what you see in front of you is synthetic monitoring Datadog can be kind of broken up into both API tests and browser tests. And both of these allow for proactive monitoring to create these simulated transactions of how we expect real users to interact with our applications. The whole point is that if we do catch issues, we can catch them before any real user is impacted. So with all the insights in Datadog, once we send these tests on all of our endpoints and all of our business critical user journeys, we can monitor our SLOs and SLAs, and we can actually identify these regional issues. So not only does Datadog have managed locations all around the world, but by setting up secured private locations, you can actually monitor anywhere you want that's essential to your business. And at the end of the day, this really does allow you to consolidate multiple monitoring tools, whether it be kind of your user experience tools, infrastructure monitoring in one place, but the fact that we can also correlate to the backend trace has really allowed organizations to ensure that you get full stack correlation with the click of a button. So Matt, I know you've kind of talked a little bit about it, but can you talk about the reasons that your organization has first decided to adopt synthetic monitoring in this proactive strategy?
Yeah, so, you know, one thing that's interesting is if you go back to the traditional monitoring where you have the database team looking at the database, the Windows team looking at the servers, and every team can say, hey, I'm all green. The network's working, the database is up, the server's online. And so your traditional dashboards, it's just going to be green across the board. But there can still be something wrong where the application is not performing or functioning as expected, and then they call you up and say, hey, something's wrong. Everybody says, hey, it looks fine to me. So that's the beauty of synthetics. And I like to describe them using kind of a buzzword of robots, like robotic process automation, or just, I tell people to imagine the synthetic monitors as a robot every few minutes, logging into your website, attempting to do a workflow, run a report, check a value. And these robots don't take vacation, they don't go on leave, they're reliable and dependable. And most of all, these robots are in, I can't remember, 24 places around the globe. And so you essentially have this army at your fingertips, logging in and checking your applications. And if they see something that the traditional monitor may not see, if the application's not performing as expected, or they click a button and it doesn't do what the buttons you would expect it to do, they let you know. They send an alarm and let you know. And so just one robotic test logging into your application, running a report, if you think about it, that actually hits all layers of your infrastructure. That hits your network, that hits your firewall, that hits your authentication, that hits your database, that hits your web server in just one single test. And so from a user experience perspective, we want to get to a situation where we are finding out before the users. And I used to tell people that ADB had the most advanced monitoring system in the world because we had 5,000 humans monitoring our systems. And when something goes wrong, they pick up the phone and they let us know. And so it wasn't artificial intelligence, it was real human intelligence monitoring. But now we're slowly changing that story and which helps with our reputation that, hey, we now have this artificial intelligence or these robots watching our systems, and then they're letting us know before the users ever find out. We can fix the system if it's sick, get it back online, and then thereby over time we're getting a better reputation that, hey, things seem to be working better around here.
Definitely. And you've actually branded this, of course, as Neighborhood Watch kind of within ADB. And this is something that you've had to tie value to, whether it be which t-shirt size. So can we actually dive into the Neighborhood Watch and kind of you walk us through your solution of implementing synthetic monitoring across ADB?
Yeah, so kind of tying what I was just talking about with the robots. You see a picture of the robots in the upper left, and then tie it back to what I said way back when, and that my team, we would never have capacity or bandwidth to be able to monitor everybody's systems for them in depth. We came up with this concept of Neighborhood Watch. And so the Neighborhood Watch is kind of like, hey, my team can look over the neighborhood, and we can use these robots as an extension of our team to look over the neighborhood. And by that, I mean, we have robots under my team who will just simply log into systems, log into the ERP, log into the HR system, and make sure it's up and functioning. But then the champions within those teams, it would be their responsibility to actually create tests that are much more in-depth and don't just log in, but actually try to run some advanced transactions, verify outputs. So, rolling back up to the high level, my team is looking over the neighborhood. And we'd be able to see pretty quickly if there were any natural disasters or fires going on. We can call the fire department if there's something happening. So this is actually quite valuable when things like we have weekend maintenance. Over the weekend, if we take a bunch of systems offline to replace some hard drives or memory or storage or network upgrades, for sure, what you're looking at here, the Neighborhood Watch, this is our dashboard of robot monitors, and they go red when something's wrong. And so like a big weekend outage, everything goes red. And then at the end of the day, when they've put everything back online, maybe it's a Saturday evening, we can watch the Neighborhood Watch and actually see those lights turn from turn from red back to green. Kind of likewise, if we have an unexpected outage in the middle of the workday, if something goes offline, we would see it here. And then when we believe, a lot of times you get a core piece of infrastructure back online, like storage, you get a storage array back online. It's really hard to tell what are all the different applications that were affected. Well, we can see that here. That's some insight that we didn't have before. And so after we put this thing online, we set up the robots to kind of monitor the neighborhood. Within a couple of weeks, and even up until now, every so often we see a server go offline or something crash, and the Neighborhood Watch catches it before the users do, and we notify the teams and the champions, and they get everything back online before the users are impacted. So if you think about the cost implications there, of if you have an outage that affects a dozen users, 50 users, 100 users, and then they're all trying to get into the application, and you think about how much time they spend and how much money that costs, the synthetics in Datadog aren't that expensive at all. Spending a little bit of money on these synthetics because the amount of time you're saving from your end users and from a monitoring perspective completely outweighs the cost. So it's an easy success story. So we made this a success story, and that's the t-shirt in the lower right. We have that at the highest tier because we believe this will continue inevitably to pay dividends for a long time.
Definitely. And one feature that you've actually taken advantage of pretty heavily within synthetics is private locations. So as I was alluding to earlier, with synthetics, we're running these tests from all around the world from managed Datadog locations. But since users can actually spin up a private location to monitor internal apps, to monitor anywhere around the world they want, that's something that they do, and that's something ADB has leveraged. So can you touch a little bit about private locations and kind of the value that's provided to your organization as a whole?
Yeah, so for those on the phone who may be brand new to Datadog, I'll explain the difference between a private location and a public location. So going back to the robot analogy, where do these robots live? What's their home office? And a public location means that the robot is in a Datadog-owned server, somewhere around the world. On the Datadog interface, you can click which city, and that just represents physical locations around the world where Datadog has servers where these robots are running. Now, when we were deploying Datadog and we were doing kind of a roadshow to all the different teams in ADB, I can tell you the most common question that we were asked, people raise their hand in the workshop and say, okay, this Datadog thing, these robots you're talking about, can they actually monitor our internal private intranet applications? And that was about a year ago. And back then the answer was, it's coming in beta. And so we got Datadog to put us on the beta, and that was essentially where you actually get the software from Datadog that you install in your private intranet, one of your own hosted servers locally, and then that robot can spin up and start running tests locally within your intranet. And so at that point, you have 100% coverage. It's no longer, oh, we can only test public things, we can't test private things. It's, no, you have private robots, you have public robots, you know, full coverage, no gaps, nothing left behind. And so again, if you go back to the reputation of IT, we now have at least, you know, I think I mentioned earlier, 1 million tests per month being run by these robots of our private intranet applications and publicly accessible applications. And then what's pretty cool is within Datadog, you can correlate the telemetry or the metrics coming from the monitoring system. So as the robots are testing the systems, you can actually see traces, logs, performance data from the robots interacting as if they were users. So it actually gives you more information to troubleshoot performance issues.
Awesome. And obviously having this creates that safety net of your core applications, kind of as you move forward, allowing you to not sacrifice agility for quality. So I kind of want to shift gears now and wrap this up by talking about some ADB success stories that have really been implemented through IT in general, and just some really cool projects that your organization has funded recently.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned before, I'm quite proud to work for a company that is bringing, you know, tangible change to the world, that we're moving the needle on things like poverty and education and gender equality. And so these are some screenshots from our website. And if you look at the bottom, these are example projects. We do hundreds of projects. We fund hundreds of projects. You know, the loans that we provide to these developing countries, the interest rate is just minuscule. It's a fraction of what they would actually get if they were trying to get a loan from a commercial bank. And then quite often we give grants, which is just free money. They don't pay us back. We also have something called technical assistance, which is world-renowned expert consulting for these countries that they don't pay for. So we're really, you know, 2 feet in, heads first on our mission of eradicating poverty and lifting the standard of living for developing countries. So at the bottom, those are just 3 examples, headlines from the website of the types of projects that we do. A really cool emerging tech example is the one of the lovely lady up at the top holding a digital ID card. So she's in Papua New Guinea. And at the right, we have hashtag financial inclusion there. So financial inclusion is the concept of, you know, not only people living in big cities with money kind of benefiting from the world of finance and banking and you know, government assistance and whatnot, but people out in the province or who live so remote that they may not have electricity, they may not have internet, they may not have access to this type of support or this system. And so a cool emerging technology program that ADB is involved in is working on a digital identification system where these people living in remote areas, they are granted a digital ID that is capable to quote unquote work offline, so that they can go out and they can interact with government programs, they can open a bank account, they can have an identity, and the card that they have would then sync up their information anytime they come within a signal of a cell tower. And that's about the extent of my understanding of that project, but it's just an interesting example of the wide variety of different things that ADB gets involved with to accomplish our mission. And so going back to, you know, Datadog and why I'm talking to you today and the examples that we have is, for these things to happen, for this good to happen in the world, for these people to get the benefit, we need our staff to be able to do their jobs. And for our staff to be able to do their jobs, they need reliable, performant, functioning IT systems. And then that's our job. That's my team's job. That's IT's job. And we are changing the game. We're raising the bar, and we're increasing all of those metrics by using Datadog and doing what we've shared today. So we're quite proud of that and proud of what Asian Development Bank does.
Definitely. And as one of the Datadog administrators at ADB, we have to ask, what's next and kind of where do you see yourself moving forward with the platform?
Yeah, so what's next is to, you know, people, as we deploy Datadog, it's often framed in the box of a project. You know, when's your project start date? When's your project end date? When does the project go live? But this is, I don't think of this as a project at all. This is actually a never-ending deployment or an ongoing business as usual, an ongoing thing, because Datadog is constantly releasing new functionality. We are constantly having new champions added to the program. So the cycle of getting champions onboarded, certified, trained, and deploying features. I don't think that will ever end. And then the amount of the features that Datadog is added into the product, I don't think that's going to ever end either. So we're in a constant cycle of learning the new features, adopting the new features, and then at the same time ourselves learning Datadog and teaching Datadog to the new champions and getting those features rolled out. So things like there's the new SLO functionality. There's the new, they announced these at the most recent Datadog conference, things like continuous integration, continuous deployment for your synthetic testing, more logging, all kinds of stuff we want to get involved in. And yeah, I think I've rambled on enough on that, but it's exciting and there's more coming.
Definitely. Awesome. So this actually brings us to the end of our slides content. I would highly encourage everyone to add in any questions. In the meantime, I'll start a Datadog demo to kind of show some of the features that Matt touched upon. Feel free to keep writing stuff in the chat while we do that. We'll be happy to answer them. So to kind of start us off, I know that Matt's touched a little bit upon dashboards and just kind of the capabilities. So what you're looking at here is a Shopist application that Datadog actually set up. Now, these dashboards are extremely easy to create. It's really just a simple drag and drop widgets where I can drop in graphs, query values, and data from across the platform. So you see here, we have that SLO feature that Matt was just touching upon to ensure that we're meeting our reliability initiatives. And as you see, we have lots of metrics pulled from across the platform. Things like some of our APM metrics, you can see some custom metrics like our business team KPIs, and tons of graphs, all from across the platform in one single view. Now, if we want to actually start pulling the data into the platform, we can do that with some of Datadog's 400+ integrations. So you see here are the many integrations, whether it be from your legacy tools, next-gen infrastructure, we can support the variety of tech stacks. So if we wanted to set up something like our AWS integration, we actually have a one-click install feature through CloudFormation to get this set up very, very quickly. We can install our agent on any of your operating systems. So if you look at Linux, for example, it's really just a one-step install. Once you set that up too, we get access to a variety of integrations beyond just the cloud integrations and some of your web-based integrations, things like your databases, Redis, MongoDB, whatever you're using today. Now, not only is it so quick to set up these integrations, but they really do provide that immediate time to value and allow you to get a variety of visualizations out of the box. So one that I want to touch upon is the host map. This is allowing you to view your infrastructure at scale. So you can see all of your hosts regardless of where they live, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud. I can slice and dice by the many tags and attributes that we actually pull. So we can see AWS, GCP, and Azure all side by side, but also see our on-prem hosts. I actually have this filtered by CPU utilization, but you can do any metric you want that's relevant to your business, and even switch the color coding in this bottom right-hand corner. You could drill in on any host that looks like it's running high in CPU utilization to quickly see what's installed, what are some tags. Just as we have this view of our servers, we actually get the exact same view by containers right out of the box. Now, as you kind of begin walking through that troubleshooting process, the problem's not always obviously in your infrastructure. So we actually have another visualization called our service map to start analyzing at the code level. As organizations have shifted from that monolithic to microservices model, you might have thousands of microservices that you're trying to manage. Now, if we look here, you can quickly see all of your microservices and their dependencies. So this is really a useful feature for onboarding new engineers, but understanding your systems as a whole. I can see that an alert was triggered on WebStore, quickly inspect and see all the related dependencies, both upstream and downstream. If I wanted to start troubleshooting further, as I know that there's an alert on this and it's a critical service, I can actually dive in and view the host, the infrastructure supporting the service, the related logs, or app analytics to understand the code performance. So if I start diving into some of these traces, we can see that those tags were applied, and through our faceted search, I can actually filter through all of my traces simply by just clicking what's relevant. So if I want to say, only show me my web store traces from this specific service that actually have an alert on it. Simply click error, and Maybe there's a specific error type, like the payment service being unavailable. That would be important for me to know, as that's a core revenue driving activity. You can quickly filter in to all those attributes and click into any trace where you're greeted by a Datadog flame graph. This is visualizing your request end to end and showing you all spans and services that were called upon in order to make that request possible. If there's an error, we can quickly click into that, view the infrastructure. We can see these metrics with the trace overlaid. View the stack trace to see the exact line of code we might want to fix, and view all the relevant logs. So as Matt alluded to a lot throughout this webinar, is that having all the data right in front of you in one single view really allows organizations to understand their systems and move quickly. So if I want to click into one of these error logs, I can simply click here, and I'm immediately taken to the log explorer where the trace ID was automatically applied. I don't need to sift through millions of logs to try to find which ones correlate to that trace, and I can automatically see it here. I can actually click in to see a beautifully parsed log, and I can even go back to the trace, all from the log explorer. Now, kind of honing in on sifting through logs is that we make that incredibly easy with Datadog. We want everyone in your organization to be able to do that. So again, through our faceted search, you can simply click web store and error logs. In a matter of seconds, we can drill that down to a more distillable number. You can also look at the live tail to see all of my logs coming in real time. So in the middle of an outage, I can go here as a first and catch any logs that I might want to focus on for troubleshooting. Now, a crucial part of Datadog's logging model is that we actually separate the cost for ingestion versus indexing. You can actually send some of your ingested logs to an archive and then index the ones that you want to retain metrics on in the platform and really analyze further. So through the live tail though, even if you didn't necessarily pay to index those logs, every single log will come through here. So like I said, in the middle of that live outage, you'll still be able to catch those critical category of logs. Now, obviously we want to adopt that proactive strategy first. So we've talked a lot about synthetics today. So I want to quickly show one feature in synthetics, which is our browser tests, where we have our applications on the right. We can interact with our applications just as a user would. I can click through my application, and as you see, as I'm clicking through, it's adding these steps as a series of steps on this left-hand side of the screen to be replayed and tested upon moving forward. We can leverage some more detailed assertions, testing a downloaded file, ensuring that an email is received, even seeing if like an element is present on the page. So I might want to see if the sofas button here, for example. So you see we have many ways to even create subtests. So with thousands of tests running, you can still make sense of them. And through our Terraform support, you can create them programmatically. I especially want to highlight that after I save this test, through synthetics, we can actually see all the steps. And then when you scroll down, you can quickly drill in on the exact trace to correlate to the backend data in APM. So I can see, again, the APM trace correlated to the synthetic test. And Matt also mentioned something his organization is going to adopt, is our CI/CD testing feature, where we can actually run these tests earlier in the development process in order to block code should we start running it in our CI/CD pipelines. Now, lastly, I just want to wrap this up. For anything you might have missed, that's where Watchdog comes in. Watchdog looks at all of your systems, even though you don't have to require any explicit setup, and says, hey, you didn't necessarily set up a monitor on this, but we think this is something you should look into, and just shows it in this nice newsfeed here. So, with all that being said, I know we've talked about a lot of content today, and it looks like there are a few questions in the chat. So let me pop that open. Oh, it looks like Matt already addressed it. But yeah, I guess feel free, please continue writing in. I know we have a few, we went through a lot in the demo, a lot in the content, and Matt and I would love to answer any questions.
Jamie?
I want to go back, have our content.
Jamie, can you hear me?
Yes.
There was, there was one Q&A and then one that somebody just sent privately to the panelists. On the Q&A, the question was, how do we join the Datadog team's community of practice? And what I was showing up there, that was internal to ADB. So if you work at ADB, just talk to me. But if you're not at ADB, this is kind of a invitation to you to set up your own internal COP in your own organization if you adopt Datadog. And then there was a question that was sent privately to the panelists. It says, of all the different personality types in IT, what was the one most important quality that everybody had in common to adopt a culture of monitoring? And the first thing that comes to mind is the I would say the passion / desire to learn. You know, there's some people that come to work and all they want to do is do simply what they were told and follow the script and then check out and they're gone. They don't really have a lot of passion or care about what's happening or care about making things better. And then you tie that in with a desire and an ability to learn and adopt new things. So the people who are excited about playing with new tools and passionate about using them to make, you know, their own job better and easier and improve things around them, that was the quality where people really went to town and we saw a lot of value.
Definitely. Well, it looks like we're at time. If anyone has questions, I'd definitely still encourage you to write in the chat. We can hang around for a few more minutes to take them. We also put our contacts in here, so feel free to reach out to Matt if you have any questions specifically about some of the work he's done at ADB. Feel free to reach out to myself if you have any questions about Datadog, and we'd be happy to answer them.
Yep, thank you. My email's there at the bottom. Feel free to ask any questions. Happy to help.